What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Congratulations to the Chiefs and Chiefs fans on a Super Bowl championship. Now, sitting here Monday after the Super Bowl, we're all thirsty for more NFL, but unfortunately it's the dark days and we gotta wait a while. So I figure it's as good a time as ever to bring some more content to the table with my way too early standings predictions for the 2020 NFL season. No playoff predictions in this video. Now, I really hope you guys don't hold me to any of these predictions because so much is going to change here with all of this. We've still got free agency, we've still got the draft, we've still got potential retirements and injuries that'll creep up by the time I do my full predictions right before next season. But let's have some fun and break down kind of where I am on these teams standings-wise heading into next season. Let's start in the NFC. In the NFC North, at the bottom, the Detroit Lions really just don't have a ton of faith in Matt Patricia and this coaching staff in general. It's a very well-balanced roster, and it's a tough out on a week-to-week basis, but maybe a team that lacks some of that superstar talent as well. So a tough out, but a team that I'm not expecting too much next year, and that is the Detroit Lions. Next up, the Chicago Bears. The quarterback situation is going to be interesting here. Do they actually stand by Mitchell Trubisky? Was that just coach speak? I think it was coach speak. I think it'll be someone else in here. Right now, I've got them at 8-8 as a really good defense yet again, and an offense that should be middling. But you know, if they bring in a good quarterback that I like, this could very well change. Number 2, the Minnesota Vikings at 9-7. This is a team, I think, milking the last leg of this window with Kirk Cousins and this aging defense under Mike Zimmer. I'm not saying it isn't going to work out. I just think it's going to be a little more of the same and aging, and I still don't trust this offensive line very much. Perhaps a slightly worse season next year. I don't know. It's going to be a very competitive team. I think a very similar team to what we had this last season. They don't have a lot of room to improve in the offseason due to cap space. Number 1 in the NFC North is going to be the Green Bay Packers, but I've got them at 10-6. So I actually think it's going to be a better football team as a whole. As in, like, people are going to be a little more afraid to play the Green Bay Packers because I do think they're going to get much better help for Aaron Rodgers on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, even if they don't draft a receiver in this incredibly deep receiver class, which they will, but you get Equanimeous St. Brown, who I thought was the second best receiver heading into last year. You get him back from injury, and Jay Sternberger, a second-year kind of really athletic tight end. So I do think that offensively they'll have some improvements, whatever they do. But the other thing with the Packers is they had an incredibly healthy season as well as winning a lot of close games. So I think they might not win as many games next year, but as a whole, I think it's going to be a better football team. And then the NFC East, at the bottom, the New York Giants, really not going to surprise a lot of people there. I just don't have a lot of faith in Dave Gettleman to improve this team, even though they have the 3rd pick in the draft or the 4th pick in the draft, whatever it is. I don't have a ton of faith in Daniel Jones, especially with Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator. Like, I actually liked what Daniel Jones and Shermer had going, but it's hard to know what you're going to get there with Jason Garrett, who's proved nothing as a play caller. So not particularly high on the Giants, especially when it's been more of the same, like, oh, we're going old school and hiring all these old school traditional coaches, going leadership over schematics and being a modern football team. So really not expecting much from the Giants. The Redskins are a team here, 3rd in the division, that I've talked about being an improved defense next year with Ron Rivera, getting Chase Young in there, you get Reuben Foster. So I do expect this to be possibly a top 10 defense and a team that could win some games off that defense alone. Offensively, though, going to be a bit of a head scratcher as far as what do they look like next year and how much faith can we have in Dwayne Haskins. Really hard to say. Second in the division, I do have the Dallas Cowboys. This could very well change. I mean, Amari Cooper and Byron Jones are set to be free agents. They still got to take care of Dak Prescott, so a lot's going to shake out for this Cowboys team. I do expect that they lose at least Byron Jones or Amari Cooper. My guess is it'll be Jones. All that said, you know, it's a very capable football team, and this could change, but I do have them at 8-8, right where they were last season, which is going to leave the Eagles first in the division, and I don't have a ton of confidence in the Eagles based on what we've seen. Like, Doug Peterson actually, to me, didn't impress me much at all last season. They dealt with a ton of injuries, though, so the injury regression to the mean is going to be positive for the Eagles, to be sure. So right now, I like the roster the most, and they kind of have the most continuity heading into next season, so they're going to come out first in the division, even if it is at 9-7 and kind of a typical NFC East season. NFC South at the bottom, no surprise here, the Carolina Panthers. 2 months ago, I predicted this to be the worst team in the NFL next year. And since then, Luke Kuechly's retired, Greg Olsen is for sure gone, and new coaching staff. This team, with David Tepper, the new ownership, they're blowing this thing up, kind of going in a full rebuild mode, and I think it's going to be reflected in their win-loss, and I have absolutely zero confidence in Cam Newton, A, being there next year, but B, if he is, actually playing at a starting caliber level with that shoulder, where he has not been able to throw the football like an NFL quarterback for about 2 years. So no confidence in the Panthers for next season. And then number 3 in the NFC South, Tampa Bay at 8-8. I've floated out the idea of buying into this team next year. It's really hard to do, especially if Jameis Winston is back. Look, I like the direction this defense is going in. I think it's going to surprise some people. And offensively, they've got firepower. But the quarterback's just a huge question mark for me. Jameis can have those explosive weeks, but he can also have those weeks where you're left scratching your head and just throws games away. So that kind of leads to an 8-8 prediction for me. Second in the NFC South, I've actually got the New Orleans Saints, and if this offseason shakes out and they're able to retain this talent and Drew Brees is back, this could very well change, but they're going to have their hands full. This is a team that has really played with fire as far as pushing this window back, like 2 or 3 seasons. Drew Brees isn't currently under contract next year, yet he's a $20 million cap hit for next year. That's not going to be easy to work around, because if Brees is back, he's not going to come back for free. You could be paying him effectively $50 million on your cap next year. So I don't know how that's all going to shake out. This team has worked magic with the cap in the past, but there could be some cap casualties as far as releasing good depth here. It's just a lot to kind of figure out what's going to go on here in New Orleans. So for now, I've got them at 10-6. And that's kind of assuming Drew Brees comes back and they have to make some sacrifices with the talent that this roster had last year to make that happen. Number 1 is the Atlanta Falcons, and this is a team that dealt with injuries last year, had a lot of youth on that offensive line that started to show out at the end of the year, so I do think this offense is going to be back as a really explosive unit next year. And actually Matt Ryan really impressed me with a lot of his ability to improvise behind a more a bad offensive line, really. And then defensively, I don't have very high expectations, and I don't know if Dan Quinn is necessarily the right guy there, but he is a defensive-minded guy, and I expect with better health and adding some talent this offseason, a slightly improved defense. So I think the Falcons have a good bounce-back year next year. And then in the NFC West, at the bottom, I've got the LA Rams, and kind of similar to what we said about the Saints, although the players that they've spent their money in is a lot younger. But, I mean, basically you got Jalen Ramsey, who's going to need to get paid here. You've got, I don't think Ramsey plays a snap next year without a new contract, by the way. Aaron Donald getting a ton of money, and Jared Goff eating up a large chunk of their salary. They don't have a first-round pick. They don't have cap space. They've got starters leaving in free agency. Their offensive line is in shambles. Sean McVay's got his hand full this offseason and next year. I think that the stars on this roster will allow them to win some games. Not to mention Todd Gurley playing as a, starting caliber running back at $16 million. That hurts. So, they're going to have their hands full dealing with the way they've constructed this roster. The star talent will help them at times, but it's going to be tough. Third, I've got the Arizona Cardinals. I do think this team is probably a year away. I think this team has a lot of finesse and excitement around Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. But when I look at the offensive line, the defensive line, major concerns. I think this team is going to be much improved next year and win some really big games and kind of get into that wild card consideration. But I think they might just fall short and really have legitimate hype the next year. But again, we'll see how the offseason shakes out. They could make some moves that I really like. The Seattle Seahawks, 10-6, you can't count Russell Wilson out of any single game. The thing is, this team, no matter who they were playing last year, because they don't have great roster talent, they could be playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, the Cincinnati Bengals, or the San Francisco 49ers. And they're still going to be, seemingly within a touchdown in the fourth quarter, relying on Russell Wilson to make plays. I don't expect a mentality shift with them wanting to run the ball with Pete Carroll and everything they do there. I expect a little more of the same, perhaps even a slightly better roster, but they won a lot of close games last year. Hard to expect that. They were relatively healthy, so I do expect the Seahawks to be good, but I'm not going to put them above the Niners in the NFC West. Now, the Niners do have some guys to deal with retaining. I don't know where their cap situation is, so Emmanuel Sanders, Eric Armstead and Jimmy Ward there at free safety. But this also was a team that dealt with a ton of injuries. You got Kyle Shanahan, the continuity there with Jimmy Garoppolo, and this defense with Robert Saleh. I expect this team to resume as the best team in the NFC next year. On to the AFC. In the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this team's going to surprise some people next year. I do like Joe Burrow and what he's going to bring to the table next year. Getting probably A.J. Green back. I do expect him back in Cincinnati. I think that they're either going to tag him or work out a contract. He seems to like it there, and there's some excitement getting Joe Burrow. They also basically get an extra first-round pick because Jonah Williams, the right tackle they took in the first round last year, didn't play a snap for them. So that's a boost. So I do like the Bengals a little bit next year. Still a lot of talent gaps there, but I do expect a pretty good, bounce-back season for them. Zach Taylor's got a lot to prove, though. And then the Browns, 8-8. I think they'll Brown their way. Cleveland Brown their way to another 8-8 season somehow, some way. I do expect Baker to have a better year with that offense, but a lot of holes to fill on that roster. It's a top-heavy roster, but and they'd let John Dorsey go. Like, do they have kind of some turnover with the new GM there? Still some question marks. I think they'll be a very competitive team and have some big upsets, but I don't expect anything crazy there from Cleveland. The Baltimore Ravens, I've got them at 10-6. It's a team that relied heavily on the run and their defense and was incredibly healthy year after year after year. Whether it was the Jags a year ago, the Bears last year, it's a pretty clear formula for regression. But the difference is Lamar Jackson has that X factor to him. So, people think I hate Lamar and hate the Ravens. Jags fans said the same thing. Bears fans said the same thing last year. It's, I'm going to hold to my analysis and what I think wins football games in the NFL. So that's where I stand on the Ravens. I still think they'll be an incredible team next year, just not quite as good. I think you're going to get some regression there in Baltimore pretty easily. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers at 11-5. I've got them winning this division clearly. I love this defense. Bud Dupree, really the only guy that they got to kind of figure out if he's going to be back. You get to add Stephon Tuitt to the group, who was on IR, despite the fact that they were wrecking teams. And then offensively, you get Big Ben back. And what kind of version do we get of Big Ben? I'm relatively optimistic about his return. And you've got some young playmakers there with James Washington, Deontay Johnson, obviously Juju and Big Ben. They're going to have a good offensive line, as they always do. So I really like the Steelers roster. They don't have any big holes next year at all. So I like the Steelers heading into next season. AFC East, I've got the Dolphins at the bottom. It's really just roster talent. They won some games, frankly, that they probably shouldn't have at the end of last year. So I do expect this team to still be in a bit of a rebuild. We'll see what they do with the draft and their cap space and everything. This could obviously change, but for now, not a ton of hope for them. The Jets at 7-9, kind of similar to the Cleveland Browns. Like, there's aspects of this team that I like. I like Sam Darnold, but I just feel like the Jets are slowly ruining Sam Darnold. So I just don't have a lot of confidence in this organization. They're good defense. Like I said, there's aspects of this team I like. I just don't have a lot of confidence. The Bills are kind of a more dramatic version of regression that I have for the Ravens. Like, they ran the ball a ton. They had really good defense, remarkably healthy. They had one of the easiest schedules I've ever seen. I'd be actually pretty surprised if the Bills went over 500 next year. I like this culture. We'll see what they do in the offseason, but I just think this is one of the most clear regressions, especially because I don't have the confidence in Josh Allen that I have in Lamar Jackson, So we'll see how their offseason shakes out. Number one, the New England Patriots at the top, nothing changing here. With or without Tom Brady, I mean, we've seen it before, like with Matt Castle. This team can still win a ton of games with defense and schematics. So I don't know if Tom Brady's going to be back or not, but I still have a lot of confidence that the Patriots are going to be stable next year with Bill Belichick as the coach. And then AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I've got them at 5-11. There's not really much to say about this team. It's going to be Gardner Minshew versus Nick Foles. It's a depleted defense, a boring team next year that I don't expect to be very good. Let's move on. The Tennessee Titans, third. Titans fans are going to hate me for this. Titans fans are just an angry bunch in general. Look, they went 8-8 this year. They went 9-7 the year before that. I don't think too much is going to change. They got really hot at the end of the year and did some really impressive things. I don't think it's going to really translate to them all of a sudden being an 11 or 12 win powerhouse next year. Ryan Tannehill's still the quarterback. I don't have a ton of faith in him. He played great. That's awesome. And actually, he's not. They need to bring him back contractually, but I do expect him to be back. I think this team's going to compete in this division. I think they could be a wild card team, just like they were last season. Second in the AFC South, I've got the Houston Texans. they gave up all their draft capital for guys last year. J.J. Watt's coming back from another significant injury. He'll still be a force. Whitney Mercilus, a year older. I don't think this is going to be a very good defense at all. Obviously, when you've got that duo of pass rushers and a guy in DJ Reader, like, they've got some pieces to have a decent defense there, but then it's really just a bunch of pieces behind them in the secondary and Deshaun Watson running around for his life and making stuff happen. So, like, they're going to be a good team. I think it's going to be a very similar season for the Houston Texans. And then I've got the Colts winning the AFC South, and that's because I have a lot of confidence in Chris Ballard to figure out this quarterback situation. Everything else on this roster is in place, so whether it's Tom Brady or Phillip Rivers or, I don't know, they draft Jake Fromm or Jordan Love to sit behind Jacoby Brissett, and then maybe he comes in and is a good rookie for the second half of the season. Anything along those lines, I just have confidence in Chris Ballard to do it right. I don't think people put enough weight in that kind of stuff when they do predictions like that. And just the core of this team and the coaching and the culture is so sound. I just, when I look at the rest of this division, I love everything about the Colts having that stability where I don't think other teams do. AFC West, I've got the Las Vegas Raiders at 4-12 at the bottom. The roster talent to me is miserable. I still think it's going to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL next year. I think the pass rush is going to be miserable because they're going to think Clelin Ferrell can take that next step up, and I don't think he can. Max Crosby's probably going to have a little bit of regression. Still going to be a good player, but I see him as a very low-end number 2 starter. So I think that pass rush is going to be miserable. The secondary is atrocious. So the defense, I think, is going to be probably the worst in the NFL next year. And then offensively, like, what is this team going to look like? They still have a ton of holes to fill. Is Richie Incognito going to come back? And if he is he going to be a top 5 left guard in the NFL? Like, I don't think this team is setting themselves up very well next year, especially because there's a lot of hype around what they accomplished this year, just as there was heading into this year. And I just think dealing with a move, this team's in for a long season. Then I've got the Chargers at 5-11, and this team does hold a special place in my heart, but I just can't really do it. That offensive line is so bad. Phillip Rivers is leaving. They're moving to a new stadium. I just can't do it. This team, this ownership, they can't seem to figure it out. They have so much talent. It's really too bad that they've kind of wasted it to this point. They wasted all Phillip Rivers' career, but I'm not going to get behind the Chargers right now until I see what they do this offseason. And then I got the Broncos at 7-9. They're another team that's got a lot of hype heading into next year with how Drew Lock played down the stretch. It really does just come down to Drew Lock. I expect they'll add a second receiver for him to work with, which will be good. I expect this defense to be pretty damn good with Vic Fangio getting Bradley Chubb back. It really just comes down to Drew Lock and how much faith you have in him. And then number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't even really need to justify that. I mean, they're getting pretty much everyone back, if not literally everyone. Dealt with a ton of injuries this year, won the Super Bowl. This is one of the better, like, teams heading into the next season coming off a Super Bowl that I can remember. Like, you guys can back me up. There's been a lot of Super Bowl winners that I've expected some regression. I don't know if I necessarily see that with the Chiefs. They could be a better all-around team next year, which is really scary to think of. All right, those are the predictions. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. We got plenty of content coming this week. My second mock draft of the year coming probably on Thursday or Friday. Gonna get working on my next Jags rebuild right now. So plenty of good stuff still to come this week. And as we move forward, cheers as always, guys. We'll see you later. Peace.